On the February 16, there was the Ukrainian parliament had to vote to qualify Prime Minister report as satisfactory or unsatisfactory. So in our case, there were 247 votes to qualify the Prime Minister report as unsatisfactory. It seemed obvious that the Prime Minister will be ousted out of the government, but 10 minutes later, deputies failed to score the needed number of votes for passing a vote of non-confidence in the Cabinet of Ministers and refused to dismiss Prime Minister Yatsenyuk. There were just 194 votes. There were 194 MPs who voted for resignation of the Prime Minister. It was not enough. We needed at least 226 votes to disband the government.
And since then, we've seen political chaos engulf Ukraine. The Batkivschyna and Samopomych parties have left the governing parliamentary coalition. The radical party of Alyona Shkrum has also announced its intention to leave, but due to a legal technicality, it has not yet done so. And what makes this sort of important is that under the Ukrainian constitution, if the Rada doesn't have a governing coalition, the president, and it doesn't form a new one within 30 days, the president could either disband the parliament or snap elections could be called.
So here we have a great panel. We have two MPs. Both of them voted to qualify the Prime Minister report as unsatisfactory. Ivanna Klympush-Tsintsadze is from the Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko bloc, and Alyona Shkrum is from the Batkivschyna party, which has it's a Yulia Tymoshenko party that would be more known for our foreign audience, which had left the coalition. So very shortly, we'd like to ask you about how you assess the events of this week. And there are two different questions from you, but obviously, Ivanna, the Petro Poroshenko party was also accused of, more or less also making their influence. There was talks about the oligarchs who agreed really to have this government in power. That there was very murky, discussion between the MPs that in the end, within the 10 minutes, some of the votes of the Petro Poroshenko party, some people didn't vote. As well, for you, Alyona, the question is obvious somehow that, your party had left the coalition, but everybody speaks, that it could lead to some future political crisis because, especially at these times when the reforms is needed. So we start with you, Ivanna.
Well, definitely, I think that most of us in the Parliament hall were expecting that after the vote, after we've decided and everybody agreed, or almost 250 MPs have agreed that the report of the government was unsatisfactory, that a no confidence vote would have also the same support, or close to the same support in the parliament, and I think that for those from Petro Poroshenko bloc also who voted for the non-confidence, it was a total shock when the results were on the screen. But I also have to underline that we did give most of the votes to this 194. 97 of them were given by Petro Poroshenko bloc, and that also has to be understood. And so therefore, I think it's clear that it will be very difficult, if not possible, to go on with the efficient work between the parliament and the government in this constellation, at least in this constellation of the government as such. And I think that we are facing the need to upgrade, reshuffle, reformat somehow this government that is so far left in power in place. And obviously the actions of our now colleagues from coalition, Batkivschyna and Samopomych, who have announced they are leaving the coalition, that is also something that creates additional pressure and need for finding a solution in this or that format in order to preserve the possibility to implement reform here in Ukraine. these, and I think that this is on the top of the agenda. And if we can be smart enough, all of us, if we can find the solution by, at least first of all, communicating with each other and getting back to the coalition agreement, which I think that everybody agrees was a good coalition agreement, and it's not that you guys have decided that now we are not signing up under this goals that we've set up there. Maybe we have to refocus them. Maybe we have to set additional timelines and timetable for each of those targets that we have in the coalition agreement, and get back to pressure the government to suggest, to come up with the ideas and ways how we can reshuffle the current government. Otherwise, we will be definitely heading to the parliamentary elections, which I don't think are needed for the country right now.
And Alyona, would you like to tell the Batkivschyna side of the story?
Yeah, of course. Well, first of all, I would say that the shock for us was not just that some people from Petro Poroshenko bloc didn't vote, but for me the shock was also, and it was a known shock, it was a predicted shock, but still, it was a shock that the opposition, the official opposition, the opposition bloc, the groups of the coalition which are in the opposition did not vote for government to resign.
So just also, while talking, ask that you suggest to show the infographic that you have for the people which is a bit confused with with all these numbers. So please.
Well,
go on.
basically, what happened? We had an opposition, quite pro-Russian in a while, and financed by the same forces as financed the Yanukovych during his time. So by the same oligarchs close to Akhmetov and close to other oligarchs. And while they criticized the government all the time during the past year, they did not vote for the government to resign. So basically, what we saw that there are certain forces connected to Russian oligarchs, connected to pro-Russian oligarchs, who did not want the government to leave. Which is basically, when the whole four parties from the ex-coalition voted overwhelmingly for the government to leave, the opposition did not, which says that this government is pretty much illegitimate, in my opinion.
And Ivanna, indeed, there were members of your party, like the former journalists like Sergei Leshchenko. They really called it to be a kind of an oligarchy coup, that there was some agreement, and there were some people who are very close to Poroshenko, and in a way, they didn't vote for resignation of the prime minister. So what is the discussion, and what would be your answer?
Okay, I do not know the motivation of each and single person that was voting against, right? And unfortunately,
have you had any discussion after that?
Yes,
all of a sudden, the party
obviously.
which...
I think that in this sense, I think we have a very democratic fraction in the parliament, in the sense that we do have very open discussions within the faction. We have pretty open discussions and positions being set by different members of the faction, and they sometimes could be even on different sides of the spectrum, so to say. But that does not lead to the dismantling of the faction as such, and therefore. But I would go back to what Alyona was trying to say with regard to pro-Russian oligarchs, but there are also oligarchs and groups that are controlled by, let's say, Mr. Kolomoisky, for example, and like Vidrodzhennia Renaissance Group, or separate MPs that have left different parties till now and are forming basically one group, which is controlled by him, and they also basically did not give their votes, and I'm afraid that there are one or two in each of the other parties that also have not voted. So it's just that Petro Poroshenko party faction is a big one, and you can see the difference in the numbers when you see that, okay, if there were, like, let's say 100 votes immediately, then minus 20 votes, and that's already 20% out of this 100. It's a huge number. So unfortunately, I do think that there was probably some manipulation by the parliamentary hall there, and there was maybe some hope that the government would stay by the oligarchs. However, I think that also does not leave us without a chance to fix the situation for the country. So it's
Sure.
about definitely interests, unfortunately, that are still very much present in the parliament, and that unfortunately are still very much influential in the parliament.
But, you know, Alyona, I mean, do you think it's ironic, though, that your party, Batkivschyna, has withdrawn from the coalition supposedly because of these, this oligarchic control, when at the same time, many people would say that the party's main patron, Yulia Tymoshenko, helped create the system that we're in today?
Well, I cannot say for the past, 30 years. I was not even there, like here in Ukraine. I wasn't even born when this happened. But actually, I think it's ironic that the Prime Minister of Ukraine has said that he would fight the oligarchs, he would do the de-oligarchization of Ukraine, and then the oligarchs helped him to stay in power. This is very much ironic. So I actually think that what we did, leaving the coalition, it was not a very easy task, believe us. So we voted. All of us in the party voted for leaving the coalition, but I think it was actually a responsible thing to do, because we cannot communicate with this government. We have criticized this government a lot. We have hoped for the Yatsenyuk to leave. It's not a secret. We have voted, all of us, for him to leave. And now I don't see any way that we could cooperate with the government.
But Alyona, Yulia Tymoshenko is known for kind of a very populistic announcement, especially when the social situation is getting worse and worse. It's something where she's getting stronger, and that's what we understand, that, for her it would be probably one of a very few parties which could possibly get a bit more votes and a bit more, in the elections if they take place, compared to the others, because that's during the time of crisis she's always good. So more or less, what you answer to those who say that the party is doing that just in order to be in a better place for the next parliament, which won't be, in fact, much different.
Well, I don't believe that. I actually think that it will be quite different. It will be overwhelmingly European. We know that people are very much pro-European in Ukraine right now. They are not pro-Russian, they are not pro-Opposition Bloc. So I actually think that during these elections, if they are about to happen, and I don't know that, and I don't think they will happen right now, there will be more people from civil society, there will be more people, like you see here, who speak English.
I strongly disagree.
There could be a possibility for a lot of new people to enter. But I actually think that it was a responsible thing to do, because, we cannot be responsible for the government when we don't trust the government. And there are a lot of critics from my place which are not populistic, in my opinion. So, for example, I am responsible for the part of the reform of the civil service and reform of the cabinet of ministers. And unfortunately, this reform can only be done by the prime minister. There are no specific, ministry or ministers who are responsible. The prime minister is responsible for this reform, and he was supposed to do the reform of the cabinet of ministers according to our good coalition agreement. He did not even start. So this would be my critics, and I can tell you point by point where he didn't do anything.
Unfortunately, I would agree that if the snap elections would happen right now, they would bring much more of the populistic forces that are feeding on the very difficult and tough economic situation for each of the citizens of Ukraine. And also we would, because of this economic situation, because of the hardship that the people have to go through, we will see a serious revanche also of the opposition bloc, which whatever they are calling right now themselves as opposition just by the name, but this is basically the old party of regions. And I think that not necessarily we will see that many of the new people from the civil society there, and I do not see a lot of additional pro-European forces coming into parliament. I also think that it would be much more fragmented, and much more of the compromises would have to be made in the new parliament.
I'd like to summarize. You are speaking a lot also for the, let's say not just for an audience. You are in the committees for the international relations, European integration, and we know that the whole crisis it is very damaging for the Ukrainian image. We've heard a lot about that. A lot is written. So how do you see the future of the coalition in these circumstances when there is so much concern of the international community about the corruption in the government, corruption also because there were members of the Petro Poroshenko party accused of the high-level corruption and the others. So how do you see the coalition works, and what you know, what would you explain to the partners who kind of bring a lot of funds to Ukraine, hoping that the situation is more stable?
If I may start, Ivanka. Well, firstly, you're absolutely right to say about corruption. So Yatsenyuk had a number of chances to resign with dignity. First, when he was accused of corruption from his own party. Second, when we actually voted for him that his work was not satisfactory. So I think in any European country, probably at this point, Prime Minister would resign himself. We had a similar crisis in Czech Republic in 2013 when Prime Minister was accused of corruption in the government. He resigned, the whole government resigned. So we did not see that. So that's why I think that it's not possible to build a new coalition with Prime Minister Yatsenyuk there. But as Ivanka said correctly, we do not have actually any doubts about the coalition agreement we drafted together. We are pushing for this coalition agreement, and I think that it is still possible. The parliament still has a big chance, and I'm an optimist, obviously, in this way, to build a new coalition with the new government, with the new technocratic, how we like to call it in Ukraine, government, and we could still push for Pan Yatsenyuk to resign and build up a new coalition together with the radical party, if it is possible, together with Samopomych, if they are willing to get there, and with the new principles of building the government. Maybe those will be the principle of open government, open selection of people, you know, people who are experts in the field to be in the government, and etc., etc. And this way we could actually go away from the parliamentary elections and try to build something there. And just one remark from my side, you also said that radical party didn't leave the coalition. Being a lawyer, I here respectfully disagree with you.
Technically.
What is technically? Because legally they did leave the coalition on the 2nd of September. There is nothing in the procedures code of Verkhovna Rada as to coalition. It's only in the constitution. The constitution says that the coalition is formed by fractions, and they left. And Pan Arseny Petrovich, so the prime minister by himself, on the 1st of September, said in the parliament that he thanks the radical party and he was going to work with them as an opposition. So he actually considered them to be opposition all of this time. So I think that this is a certain manipulation, but technically, in my opinion, the coalition doesn't exist right now.
Okay, there are different possibilities to explain whether it exists or not, and I would leave it to specifically to lawyers to do that.
Yeah.
And I think we have to concentrate on the. I think there will be pressure from even those who are staying so far in the coalition towards the government to seriously, to put it mild, reshuffle, and this pressure will not be diminished in any way, and it will be targeted at the Prime Minister Arseny Yatsenyuk. It will be targeted at those ministers who have been accused of corruption and who have been accused of misdeeds or not enough deliverables. I think it's absolutely inevitable that there will be a serious change in the government, but that I don't think that serious change in the government means that the country is incapable of working further. And again, I think that if the government would come up with a real reformist draft laws to the parliament, then neither Batkivschyna nor Samopomych would have any way not to vote, not to support those laws if they are really reformist. And then it would be de facto coalition working for the reform in Ukraine. So it's not about the formalities.
Yeah. And my final, so Alyona, do you think that there is an agreement between the president and the prime minister to really just stay in power and don't really make a huge reshuffle?
It's a difficult question. I think that a lot right now depends from the position of Petro Poroshenko, of the president. And I think that he hasn't made his choice yet. So a lot will depend on him whether he is going to work and cooperate with Mr. Yatsenyuk or whether he is going to push for him to resign. And
so is any agreement in order to things stay like they are?
Is there agreement
between the president and prime minister?
I think that the president, when he was speaking out on Tuesday, he actually pretty clearly said that he would be very much welcoming the decision of the government to resign and to reshuffle. So I think this is not the end of the story yet, and we will see how it will be developing. that means that we all have to, first of all, include all our wisdom we have and all our willingness to work for this country and to make sure that it doesn't collapse.
Okay, we will follow that. Thanks a lot. That was Ivanna Klympush-Tsintsadze from Petro Poroshenko Bloc and Alyona Shkrum, Member of Parliament from the Batkivschyna party.
Thank you.
We'll come back in a minute.